Hello and welcome to Lesson 2, Video 8. And we will be talking shortly on the fuel window, where we can observe and change the parameters of our different fuels in the model. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the fuels windows. I will introduce you to the groupings and types of fuels that you can find there. And we will be talking about how to make a new fuel if needed. So, where to find our fuel model, fuels window. So, in the top, of course, and clicking on this fuel will yield our big fuel window. And as you can see here, we have two tabs, all fuels and one fuel. We're going to concentrate mostly on the all fuels because they have the same data. And you can see how it has all our different fuels used in the model. And that you can also see here, that is, we have the fuel used in area chosen. Now, if you go to the one fuel instead, in this case crude oil, we can see that we can actually change the type. And you can see we have a number of different things to choose. So in this case, it's a fossil resource. We can choose electricity, secondary fuel, wood, biomass, generally renewables, non-energy, and so on. And what does this mean? Well, as you saw in our secondary and primary, there was a change in that, and that's actually this that defines that. So if it's a fossil resources, well, then we need a base year reserves, we need all these other things. If it was a secondary fuel, it would be put under secondary, and electricity is just its own thing, even though it's listed as secondary as well. So all these things that can be done. Then we also have the fuel groupings over here. And here we can also see there's also a grouping for that matters in the groupings when we have the energy balancing and other places. It's not really a very specific thing that changes a lot. It is just when we are compacting tables to be smaller, when then we can put them in put them under something like the oil products that we've seen before. Other fuels, of course, if it's just different fuels, that doesn't matter much. As a general catch-all for renewables, so we have different options on that as well. So here in the main window, the different types and groupings. You can see we have the same here. We have the different ones listed as their fossil resources, secondary fuels, and so on, as we could use before. And then we also have this resource by land type. We will get to that in lesson 3, I think. But you can see there has been chosen for all the inbuilt fuels. If you switch from the fuel used in our area, which is just, then it only contains the fuels that are actually in our primary and secondary and that have been throughout. Well, switch us to all fuel. We can see all the fuel that is listed within LEAP automatically or as an already reference. This is a very short window. There is actually, I think it is 44 fuels by standards that all have their type groupings and a lot of all other effects like carbon intensity and so on listed to them. So there are 44 fuels in LEAP as per standard, and we can always add more. So we are going to talk about that in. Yeah, we'll have that in. That's of course if you choose all fuels. And again, 44, I think. Now, if you want to make a new fuel, we press a little plus sign on the top, like this one. No, sorry, that was on former screen. We press a little plus sign that was next to our fuels list. Now, we can either create that with a given state, and we have an empty fuel with a certain name, or we can also copy it from an existing fuel. So if you want, for instance, our local form of coal, then we can take the coal that fits most, copy from that, and just slightly have a change name and some slight details that are different. So that's a really good way of starting out with for fuel. Most times you would just copy from existing fuel and go from that. It could also be a specific form of jet kerosene that's a little lower in value than what it is for international flight that you use for your local flights, and so on. There are many ways. Yes, as you can see here, when we have made that, just very simply, it gets put as a 45th fuel that's available. Here we can also see some of the detailing for our different fuels. So we have both their heat content or energy content per a certain unit. So that's the not energy intensity, but energy content per fuel. We have the low height heating value that we can be used in different places in our transformation sector. That will get once again heat value. We have their density. Not sure what it's used for, to be honest. And then we have their carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, ash, lead contents. These can be used for effects. We will go into that in the next video. But that can also explain some of your pollution numbers and of course CO2 emissions. And then we also have a moisture contents, which does which contribute to some losses as well. So it's a good detailing there is around these different fuels. Again, we are just looking at what we have there. We can always add our different details. So ours didn't come with much, but we did just add I think the carbon intensity of our fuel, just for the show of it. But of course these can also all be filled out to have a good representation of our fuel, or realistic representation in our fuel. Now the question is, why is our test fuel not showing up in neither our primary or secondary fuels? Well, the short and long answer is it's not being used. So if we were to put that into use either in a demand sector, transformation, anywhere, then it would show up in our then it would show up within all our fuels in our model. But it is not part of our model yet because it hasn't been added. The same with all the other 30-some fuels that isn't being used in our model. They don't show up because they're not used. Just to keep it simple.